Bizarre. All right, well, this will just be a recorded lecture then, presuming that other people can't access the Teams meeting for some reason. I apologize as opposed today for the Teams meeting being asynchronous and in my own head and in Garrett instead of as a group. However, I guess the lecture material will be the same. Still returning home to Odessa and strandedness in southern Colorado. I'll be back tomorrow probably with the 1-year-old boy, and then we'll begin class for all my classes normally. No more craziness, no more teams, thank God. Presentations galore next week. I think we'll have 2, if not 3 on Tuesday, and then 1, maybe 2 on Thursday next week as well. Apologies. That said, let's not waste time talking about my Murphy's Law life and exhaustion and heat exhaustion and generally greasy hair. Let's talk about semiotics and Eagleton's conclusion of structuralism, and some things that semiotics is broadly conceived as. I'm not going to steal Edward's thunder, Alexis's thunder, or Ben's structural thunder, but there are some things that we should talk about as far as musses over or doesn't want to admit are present at all. So one thing that's the basics for semiotics, right, is the relation between, right, signifier and sign, between referent, right, and between expression and referent, between like the signifiers, CAT, the symbols, right, the sound of the word cat and the cat as an object, right, as he talks about Saussure, as well as Saussure and what, Levi-Strauss, rather. Levi-Bruhl is a mythologist. I was going to say Levi-Bruhl. Levi-Strauss, a structural linguist, are concerned with the ways in which words mean anything at all, the way letters mean anything, and words are composed of them. And they say it's basically, or Eagleton surmises, as the concept of difference, right? The difference between a cat and a dog is that a dog is not a cat. And the only way a cat is because it's not any other of the million billion things in the world, right? The only way that this chair is a chair is because it's not a couch, not an alligator, not a cup, not a tampon, not a Kleenex, not a computer, not a, right? And only through the elimination of everything else in the world do we know for a fact it's a chair. There's some epistemological, some cognitive issues with how we can make that assumption, right? If we have an idea of difference, something is only the thing it is because it is not anything else. That seems to negate the possibility of the creation of a new object or a new meaning, right? So was a computer always a computer because it wasn't anything else before we even had a computer, right? Was a Ford F-150 always a Ford F-150, but only by coming into existence and therefore it not being a 250 or a Dodge Ram, right? Are those the only reasons why it is an F-150? The kind of difference in negation as the way we derive meanings of signs and signifiers seems to me to be philosophically and maybe cognitively a bit flippant for Eagleton to make that claim, that that's a valid way of determining the meaning between sign and signifier, referent, and the reference, right? Edward has messaged me, so I'm not sure what's going on. Messages. Phone. I'm responding. Edward says, "Are we still meeting on Teams today?" I'm gonna respond, "Yes, we're there right now," or "I am." So inshallah, the gang will all join in, and I'll be lecturing to someone other than myself. Although this has been fun already. Self, thank you, Self. You're welcome, Self. Great works, indeed. Hopefully, someone else joins in the fray here. So we're going. Well, same message. Damn. Anyways. Yeah. All right. So the idea of semiotics and structural linguistics, the idea between the signified and the signifier that Levi-Strauss and Saussure try to add into it, is to think about literary and poetic language as doing something different than just cat. And you knowing I'm not talking about an alligator, right? The idea of things like connotation, denotation, symbolic meaning, metaphoric meaning, metonymy, gesture, symbol, uh, um, uh, allegory, typology, right? These specifically poetic constructions of meaning and compressions of language, right? Seem to be doing something more than merely love is a red, red rose, not as a matter of difference, because love is not a black, black rose, it's not a red, red tulip, it's not a yellow, yellow daffodil, it's not. So we have different interplays between signifiers and signifiers in interesting ways in poetry that I think Eagleton gives short shrift for the semioticists and the poets in general in his book. So we're going to look at some more examples of semiotic relations in poetic works and kind of kick it to Eagleton as far as his, straw manning the work of Saussure and of Levi-Strauss. So when we consider a word's denotative value, right, it's the dictionary definition. If I say cash, right, money, right, cash is a currency, a hard currency, right, not a check, not an IOU, not a money order, not a representation. Cash is the dollar bill, right? That's the denotative term of cash or currency or money, right? Money could be a check, a money order. It could be a credit card. I got money, I got paid. It could be a dowry or a trust fund I have could be money, right? Cash is like the money at hand in your hand to give somebody else, the hard currency, right? Whether or not it's backed by gold or not anymore, right? Cash is the hard physical money that represents the ability to buy something, right? Now, if I say doubloon, right, that's a specific kind of cash, right? A specific kind of coin, but it doesn't mean the same thing as saying cash or quarter, right? It has a different connotative value, and connotative value pulls in a mythical social milieu, right? Who says doubloons? Treasure Island says doubloons. Jack Sparrow says doubloons. Pirates say doubloons. Swiss Family Robinson says doubloons, right? It's the coin of piracy, of the Caribbean and swashbuckling, walking the plank, and Captain Hook and Treasure Island, the whole deal, right? It has that idea with it. That's not something that's necessarily in the denotative value of the word doubloon. It's just a kind of currency from a country at that point in time, right? But we say doubloon, we think of treasure chests and peg legs and parrots and rum drinking, right? If I say sixpence, right, I think definitely, because it's the name of a British coin, right? I think of a British setting, right? It's still a piece of currency. A sixpence is a currency. A pound sterling, right? Rubles, rupees, drachmas, dinars, different names for currency, right? But the connotative value of saying doubloon, right, is a different, or a pieces of 8, or silver dollar, or buffalo head penny, right, are more telling of the culture, the historical period, and the speaker than is saying cash or currency or coin, right, or what, malum in Latin. Yeah, no, pecunium in Latin, right, is cash money, right? uh Bad, I think. So anyways, that's the difference between connotation and denotation. The thing is, connotation is not something that is a structuralist, unaltering, non-culturally sensitive principle like Eagleton wants folks to believe. That's, connotation is directly and completely. Oh damn! Hang on, let me get the code to y'all. Sorry, y'all. Y'all, damn, how the hell? Copy? But not already out there. It should be there. It should be there. It should be there. Oh, I just didn't link announcement. It's on pages already, guys. It's just didn't link the damn announcement to the pages. So gone. And go, little sparrow. Also respond on here. So yeah, sorry, it was a freaking tab. I didn't link the pages in the announcement like I did yesterday. So mea culpa, maximum culpa, some more Latin for you there. So we should have everybody popping in a second. Y'all missed the pregame on semiotics and connotation, but we'll catch everybody up to speed. I'm just gonna mute the mic for a second, take a breath while everybody else piles in. Kind of like the clown car got here a little bit late, and all the actors are piling out. Inshallah, they begin to appear digitally, virtually, existentially, ethereally. Hola. Try this again. New message to everyone in the course.
Take care.
Are people lagging or lagging behind still or not? I just messaged another freaking link to everybody in their message box. Sorry, I created the freaking page on the team's announcement and link on the pages button like I did last time, but I didn't link the pages button to the announcements tab on the course site. It's now there, and it's under pages as well on the freaking Canvas site. I've been lecturing to myself about semiotics. It's been very hotly contested between myself and I. What I'm denotating and what I'm connotating in my reference, my intent, signifier, my signified. In case, y'all can go watch the tape. It was like Abbott Costello performance. I'll wait till everybody actually gets in before I proceed. Other people are finding the link now, inshallah. That's Edward. Hey, Edward. Sorry for the confusion, bro. I posted on the pages tab, but not under the damn announcements tab dash on Canvas. No more teams after this. No more teams. Rugged individualism. 1, 2, 3, 4. We got 4. Anybody else in the classroom who's trying to pop in? Or are we?
Jesus Christ.
Whoa, Jesus Christ, Victor. Are there more people in the classroom who just aren't logged in individually? I should just proceed, or?
I'm about to log in. Oh, okay. I guess we're all trying to log in.
I just want to make sure there's people there that they're not like at their home waiting for something a Bluebird to appear and tell them the link's out there now. So Krista and Annalee, who's all there in the room?
Yes.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah, Jesus.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, right. I bet you're logged into Teams too, Jesus. So you count as double here.
Yeah.
I guess. All right. So y'all can go back if you want and watch the first 15 minutes of this recording. I talk about apologies again to Edward and to Ben and to the presentators. It'll be happening on Tuesday for sure. If I have to, then a full body cast on a ventilator and in a cone of silence, it'll have Ben and Edward, and I think Alexis will present on Tuesday. So it'll be a trifecta, unless Alexa wants to go Thursday, but then we have somebody else going Thursday too. So presentations galore next week. I'll make cupcakes and coffee, and it'll be a lovely, lovely time. Tonight, semiotics, structuralism, nitty-gritty lecture. Not to take away what you're doing, Edward. I think we're going to have very little convergence on our analyses. I think same with Alexis.
It's right.
Semiotics presentation. I'm going to break down his analysis of Lévi-Strauss and Saussure and his ideas about the connotation, denotation, metaphoric, valence, symbol that Poetics is doing. This is through on pages 198 through 104 in the Eagleton, and kind of take Eagleton to task for his just like bigoted hatred of structuralists for no good damn reason. And the things he's talking about not being culturally situated, as always, are absolutely culturally situated, and the Marxists can be okay with that, and it's not that bad. And look at semiotics in Poetics, as particularly what the lecture is about. I don't think I'm going to step on any toes with any of the sources or theorists y'all will be touching on. I'll mention Saussure and Lévi-Strauss, but not. I'm not giving the biographies or anything in case that's something y'all were going to do in your presentations. I'm going to talk about the theories of differential identity and Austin's speech act, and Eagleton's bastardization of that as well. So let's go ahead and just get some structure right. Nah, no pun intended. What Eagleton's talking about on pages 102 through the end of the chapter, right, is the the problem he has with structuralism and semiotics, both trying to over-science the text, to strip out all the context and make it the series of ultimate rules where the content of the literature doesn't matter. It's merely the organization of these neat little structures, or the and signifiers, right, by an author or by a textual assembler, right? And what the words mean is irrelevant. The structure is all these theories are studying, he says, which is obviously horseshit, right? Because Bakhtin, for example, or Saussure is not dealing with, here's the structure, how, like, if you have for example, if you have the word cat, bat, rat, sat, gnat, hat, right, in a sentence, right? Rat sat on a cat with a bat and a hat, and Nat King Cole was playing the trombone, right? Freaking, there's no structural system by which those words in that order yield any different meaning than in any other order, right? And so the content of those words, meaning their relationship to each other, not in a structural sense, but in a cultural sense, right? In Egyptian cultures, cats are a deity. In some cultures, rats are a food source. Nat King Cole is really only relevant in America, right? These words have meanings that are culturally implicated, and their meaning comes from not their structural bare scat, from their deep signifying of an actual object, right? And so when he says that structuralists and semiologists are looking at only the same thing the Russian formalists were, and like Tristan Shandy is the same as freaking is Cervantes is the same as freaking Camus, right? It's just, here's a symbol, it goes next to this symbol, and then there's a plot twist and a reversal, and you could put any content in there to be the same thing, is crap. And one of the ways we is in the poetic analysis he tries to do on pages 103 and 104. He starts talking about the between denotative and connotative meaning that Saussure it brings up in his structural linguistics, and not only connotative and denotative meaning, but the way that metaphor works, the way that symbol works, the way that metonym works, the way that synecdoche works, allusion, assonance, in poetry specifically, right? And Eagleton tries to just bounce us off as saying that it's the same hollowing out that's non-culturally considerate. It's a rule that doesn't have any historical reference, that doesn't have any consideration of the people who are reading it, and has to be unchanging across all time, whereas different people at different times approach text differently. This is obviously not true. If I say the word coin, right, that's a denotative meaning. A coin is it has other meaning. Right? That's a metaphoric use of the word coin, right? Because I'm stamping a coin, right? I'm making something solid from something molten, right? So when I say I'm coining a phrase, it literally is a deep metaphor of the process of actually embodily making a coin. So there's one reason Eagleton's wrong. Second reason, the denotative value of coin is a piece of currency, a heart or a, or could be square, whatever, a piece of money that has currency in a culture. What if I say doubloon? What does that bring to y'all's mind if I say doubloon? Doubloon. Pirates, thank you. Who was that? I hate the notifications. Actually, sit down. Oh, that's the problem. My messages are down. Son of a bitch. Message is up. Edward, pirates. Yes, yes, yes. Indeed, right? R. I mean, freaking Shiver Me Timbers, Long John Silver, Swiss Family Robinson, Treasure Island. Pirates, right? That's a connotative meaning. A doubloon was the name of a coin from, I think, I want to say Portugal. I could be wrong, right? That was usually intercepted and traded by pirates. It's no different than a freaking sixpence as far as its coinageness, right? But because it had a particular cultural cachet at a certain time that was used for a certain genre of creative, fictional, and historical writings, right? It has a connotation of freaking pirates, peg legs and hook hands, right? If I say denare, if I say sixpence, if I say pounds fucking sterling, if I say drachmas, rupees, rubles, these mean things about the culture. They're connotative to the culture, right? But coin is universal across these. All cultures have a coin, or not maybe not all. Most cultures have a coin, whether it's a dinar, a drachma, a sixpence, a 50-cent piece of silver dollar, right? So the connotative meaning of these coins names is culturally specific as well. Okay, so that's the doubloon coin example is betterly disproving Eagleton. However, then look at something like a metonym, right? So what's a metonym? It's a taking place of an action as opposed to an object, right? Okay, a metonymy is replacing an entire action with a substituted piece. So instead of saying like love is a red, red rose, right? If I said the war works hard, right? I'm taking the object of war and metonymizing it, right, to a process of working. So I'm not saying war is working hard, right? The war works hard is both an actionizing use of, it's giving war a characteristic, right, which is continuous, and the action is being replaced by the noun. We have synecdoche, which is similar, right, which is like, what's this called? Is it tissue? Call it tissue? It's made by Norm Life. It's called Whisper Soft. We call it a Kleenex, don't we? Right? Where the one name takes the place of a whole class of objects is synecdoche. That is absolutely culturally determined. You call all soda pops Coke in the Northeast, right? Sorry, is that are people not chatting? I'm not sure. Okay, never mind. I thought somebody messaged. All right. You call all Cokes, all soda pop, all, what do you call them? Carbonated beverages that are soft drinks. You call them Cokes in the North, or soda in the South, right? The Midwest, you call them soda pop, right? You have Depends, right? But there are a bunch of adult diaper brands, right? But they're all called Depends as a synecdoche for the name brand, which is the most prevalent form of it, right? So it's a hierarchy of ordering of objects under a single name, right? That's culturally determined, right? Kleenex is not Kleenex because it's not a cat and not a dog and not a diaper and not a napkin and not a wet wipe and it's not the differential divergent dichotomous meaning that he's talking about. that he's talking about Saussure and Lévi-Strauss relying upon to give meaning to the signified, right? It means something that was created by culture, and through that cultural connotation, it becomes its synecdocheic referent. Same with metonymy, right? They are culturally bound, and Eagleton, I think, rejects that. The other thing, too, sorry, let me find his poet. This is irks me real bad, sorry. All right. Okay, a literary work, this is on 104 at the top. If it's a piece of language, a literary work, right, which has been detached from any specific living relationship and thus subject to the reinscriptions and reinterpretations of many different readings, the work itself cannot foresee its own future history of interpretations, cannot control and delimit these readings as we can do or try to do in face-to-face conversation. The text anonymity is part of its very structure, not just an unfortunate accident which befalls it. And in this sense, to be an author, the origin of one's own meaning over them is a myth. Even so, literary work can be seen as constructing what have been called subject positions. Homer did anticipate that Eagleton would read Homer, right? By his language, by virtue of the ways it's constructed, unavoidably offers certain positions for a reader, vantage points from what it can be interpreted. Okay, so he's saying that basically that the whole idea about author's intentionality not being part of the text, right? That we can't say the text exists as an organic whole. The author, we should consider the words on the page or their historical situatedness or the material modes of production, like Eagleton's argued in the New Criticism and What's English chapters, right? Now he's reinserting the author as this kind of blind, I don't know, a dice roller for what the freaking text could be. But this is pointless, right? The text could damn well be written by, the monkeys in the room with War and Peace typing on typewriters, right? They're going to write something, and that text can be read and interpreted different ways, right? The point of it is not language of Homer is somehow static and to be reinterpreted by everyone in a non-changing way. The language of Homer denotes specific cultural nuances, Greek ideas, the way Greek language is constructed and referred to, right? That Eagleton, in reading and translation, or even if he reads the Greek, right, cannot grasp what Homer intended. The nuances of it, which Eagleton seemed really fond of in other places, right? The signifier and the references it's making are not apparent to someone that historically removed from the language, right? Because again, and this is where we get in the speech act theory, language is not merely the dead, scratches on. It is a living and breathing social construction, right? And so to say that all of a sudden Eagleton takes the sociality out of it and talks about how these preserved, unintentional, unforeseeable language effects that Homer created or Dryden created, right? Seems so irksome to me, because that's exactly the position he was like bagging on 2 chapters ago, right? So let's go to the bottom of that page. Where is it? All right, so the bottom of 105 then. The ideal reader or super reader posited by structuralism was in effect a transcendental subject absolved from all limiting social determinants. It owed much of a concept to the American linguist Chomsky's notion of linguistic competence, by which was meant the innate capacities which allow us to master the underlying rules of language. But not even the Lévi-Strauss was able to read text as would the Almighty himself. Indeed, it has been plausibly suggested by Lévi-Strauss's additional engagement with structuralism had too much to do with political views about those for France, views about whether or not there was anything divinely assured. Right? Structuralism is, among other things, one of more literary theories series of doomed attempts to replace religion with something as effective. In this case, science. Right? Sorry. Somebody message me? I can't see the messages. Is anybody trying to message me? I see Mariana joined. The last thing I see is metonym style. Is that the last thing anybody said? I don't want to be, y'all can hear me, right? See me, right? Thumbs up, some. We're tracking somewhat. I haven't heard anything from anybody. Okay, cool. I just want to make sure I wasn't, I mean, if everybody's asleep, that's fine. But if like I'm talking to no one. Cool. Thank y'all. Okay, cool. All right. So he's saying structuralism was a doomed attempt to reduce, to eliminate religion and replace it with science by structure, by objective reading of literary works, right? And then he gets into the structuralist identification of various signifying units of the text in the first place. How did the structuralists decide that of science constitute a basic unit without recourse to frames of cultural assumptions, which structuralism in its strictest forms would ignore? For the Bakhtin, language was just because it was a matter of social practice and inescapably shot through with valuations, with value judgments, right? Words don't only denote objects, but imply attitudes to them in the tone in which you say, pass. I think I just changed the meeting option so I can't be muted by anyone. Y'all hear me now? No one has muted me again? Yeah, because someone muted me. You'll see when you watch the video recording, it says you have been muted by somebody. So I was muted by somebody. There's some rascally scalawag. I know it's back because I'm not muted anymore because I changed the meeting rules so y'all can't mute me. We'll go to the tape. See what it'll say on my thing. Someone's muted you. It should tell me who at least. Oh, I forgive you, Edward. If it's not intentional, that's good, man. It's a tech error. It's a glitch then, right? Okay. This isn't Prisoner's Dilemma. I don't need 8 or 9 people claiming to fucking mute. Did everybody fucking mute me at the same time? Is anyone listening at all? Like, oh crap, I unmuted him. Now we know. Just joking. All right. So this is where was I at? All right, so the idea about connotation and denotation and structuralistic rules, right? For structuralism, trying to break down not the meanings of words based upon the objects they refer to in the real world, right? But the structures which language operates within, right? Like again, when he said about structure, or I said about formalism, what happens in the story doesn't matter. Structuralism cares about, you know, the journey, the rising action, the conflict and opposition, the overcoming of it, the death, the plot twist. But you could put, Clint Eastwood or Gowan or Lance Armstrong in there and have a bike race or a yacht race or a spaceship race or a world war. And structurally, the structuralist critics, Eagleton says, would not be interested in any of that narrative, just the ways that it plays out as a series of, here's a metaphor, here's a plot twist, here's an exposition, here's a description of a plant, here's foreshadowing, here's some freaking flashbacks, right? And that's all I would care about. He's saying the same thing about the structural linguistics here, in that in a poetic analysis, they don't care about the content of the devices being used. They care about, okay, Keats goes from an assonant couplet to a metaphor, and the metaphor has an image as part of it, and the metaphor's image is a sonic image, and the image that's sonic is then related to a simile in the next line, right? But it doesn't matter what the actual words are that are part of these devices, and that's wrong. I think Eagleton's dead wrong. Part of the reason for this is because when you have a poetic device that compresses and pushes language, it changes the meaning of all the other language around it. Not only that, there are deep metaphorical structures in language, even the language Eagleton's trying to use to analyze these poetic terms, which are innately metaphoric and traced back to deep structural metaphors in language that Eagleton doesn't account for and is bound to use. So that might sound complicated. Let's go to the tape, okay? Let's look directly at page 106 in the last paragraph on that page. That structuralism has in some ways become complicit with the aims and procedures of such society is obvious enough in the reception it has received in England. So just this sentence, structuralism has in some ways, right, become complicit with the aims. So aims, right, is a metaphor. What are the aims? The goals, right? How do we have the idea of an aim as something one wants to achieve, right? That relies on a deep underlying metaphor that life, that action is a linear journey, right? A long day's journey to night, right? Life is a journey. The coachman's waiting for me at the final destination, right? So even the concept of an aim as being something a pursuit or a discipline or a people or an individual wishes to achieve makes no sense to the human mind unless it's grounded in a deeper metaphorical structure, right? I aim at something distant from me. I wish to there, I've accomplished it. When I hit it with my arrow by crossing the distance, I've accomplished it. So there's a metaphor, deep structure there in that time is distance, that life is a journey, that accomplishment of a goal, an abstract intellectual goal, is the same as reaching a destination physically, right? And this is also mapped on to the idea of life as progress, a pilgrimage through life, right? So the only way that even talking about an aim as the goal of a study or a school of thought may, as a semioticist or a linguist, is because of deeper poetical metaphoric structures that it relies upon to be even sensible at all, right? So let's look again. The aims of and procedures of such society is obvious enough in the reception it has received in England. So what about reception, right? So what is reception? Is to receive, right? What is deceive? To deceive is to distance oneself from something, right? So if I'm giving something, I'm severing something, right? I'm giving it out. So when I receive something, I'm being reunited with, right? I'm receiving back part of myself. These are metaphoric that aren't based upon freaking not being a cat, not being a dog, not being a act of gift giving, right? So the idea there is both a reception, as in the critical reception, how people have received and acclaimed it, right? And then the reception of the the reception of that reception by the discipline, i.e., structuralism is aware that people in England things about it, right? Again, relies on a metaphoric structure of deep language, that if I can receive their praise and thanks the same way they receive my criticism, right? It has an economical, linguistic, I almost forgot the word. It's metaphoric, right? Like they don't receive my damn structuralist criticism, right? They think about it and they give me an opinion on it, right? It's not as if I sent them a letter. The reception, like reception theory, right? How it affects one, right? Is based upon a metaphor of someone receiving a gift, a physical object. You receive news, though, right? You receive opinions, you receive criticism, you receive consternation and promotion, right? Which are metaphors for actual objects being given or lost, right? And so you can't even have these, you don't have language functioning at all without the deep poetic element of metaphoric transference, metaphoric comparison. So let's look at it this way too, okay? So in a metaphor, right, you have, I'm not a drawer or a mathematician, but you have an axis, like an x-axis, right, and a y-axis. Dun, dun, dun. An x-axis and a y-axis, let's say. Boom, boom, right? You have a domain and a range. Metaphor is mapping a domain onto a range, right? And the range should be as unfamiliar as possible with the domain to get the maximum amount of associative poetic meaning. So, have you ever heard the vehicle and the tenor in a metaphor? Right? The vehicle is a thing that is being modified, and the tenor is that which is the modification. So the domain onto vehicle and tenor, right? So the domain is a thing that the metaphor is talking about. Love is a red, red rose, right? Or a simile to. Love is the vehicle, right? Tenor is rose. The domain is love. The mapping onto the range is the the tenor in the traditional nomenclature, right? So if we take these meanings, how is love like a red, red rose, right? This is giving a new meaning and understanding to what we know about love. From now on, after we read that and understand that in that new, weird, different way, love can never remain the same. There's new associations. When I hear Eliot say, I have heard the eternal footman holding my coat and snicker, and certainly I was afraid, right? My thinking of coachman or of death or of like nighttime in the winter can never be the same because there's these images and metaphors brought to this idea, right? When I hear Dickinson, there was a funeral inside, funeral inside my mind. I think something like that. Or William calls upon a red wheelbarrow, right? These significations given to these objects through metaphoric transference, right? What depends upon a red wheelbarrow? What about its position gives it its meaning, right? These things make language richer and cannot be taken away. They're not merely metaphor one, metaphor two in the scientific like this chemical reaction, just get rid of any actual content and can be reduced to scientific equations or mathematical equations. No, it has to do with the words that are being used. So let's look at another way that connotation works or metaphor works too, right? So if I'm mapping something that's really unfamiliar, poetic, let's look at, for example, Pablo Neruda in the artichoke, right? It has a long series, a conceit where he compares this artichoke to like his skin to armor, right? The artichoke skin is armor, which makes sense as far as a visual image goes, right? And the eater of the artichoke is conquering the artichoke and peeling it off, right? And the artichoke's becoming naked. And so there's other valence in rich language, right? But it's still just an artichoke, right? And it's not the structure wouldn't work the same for a grape. The structure wouldn't work the same for a banana or a plantain or whatever. And so the cultural and historical groundedness in these poetic forms and devices are not interchangeable as Eagleton would lead you to believe, or as Eagleton says the structuralists would have you believe, right? I mean, I got a bit in the weeds on that. Does that make, is everybody kind of tracking? I'll give you a concrete example in a second here. What the F is my poetry thing? Everybody sort of tracking halfway, 40%, where we at? Huh? Nothing?
Can you say that again? I didn't hear you.
Sorry, how well are we tracking? How of what I said, I'm gonna give you another example in a second, but we're like 40%. Out with the social practices and poetic structures and metaphors. Okay, thank you, Edward. Well, where's the okay. Let me find this. So the Austinian part. Okay, yeah, that's what I'm doing. Excuse me. So this is on 103 for those of you playing at home. The bottom, or 102, the bottom, right? Some significant works has fallen in our own time from this radical anti-structuralist perspective, which is talking about Bakhtini's theory of language, right? which is that like polyphony is kind of like language is materialistic itself. Like language emerges as this kind of chaotic, non-monolithic productive system. It's not based on these differences or these like cat is not a cat because it's a dog, not a hedgehog, and not a chair, right? It's not dialectic, meaning it can be productive and generative. This is what T.S. Eliot believed too, right? Like if the word chimera comes out of nowhere, or I compare a cat to a Toyota and come up with some Toyota thing, right? It might make no sense, but like the possibility of this, cat-headed car, I guess, like a I don't know, like a what do you call those things? Man, my mind is like a font, or like a chimera, right, with a cat head and a car body, right, or like a liger, like a monster, sure, a monster, right? That is an unwieldy combination of different known objects, right? A liger is not a liger because it's not a tiger and not a lion. It is both of those, right? And so the fact that these dialectic notions of meaning, right, break down when there is an associative combination that language is producing creatively, right? Saussure and Lévi-Strauss theories fall down because I know what a round square is, even though it's an impossibility to think of. If I say round square to you, you maybe couldn't draw a picture, maybe you could, but like it's not a meaningless phrase. It's a paradox, it's a contradiction, but it's not empty, right? A structural linguist would say that has no content as far as a thought or an object, right? Or a silent cacophony, right? Or a like paradoxes and objects that can't be defined dialectically. So here's Bakhtin says that's fine because language can produce meaning. Okay. It has also remote relation with the current Anglo-Saxon linguistic philosophy, which is far from concerned with such concepts as ideology. Speech act theory, as it's currently known, began the work of English philosopher J.L. Austin, and especially in his jocosely entitled How to Do Things with Words in 1962. Austin had noticed that not all our language actually describes reality. Some of it is in performative, aimed at getting something else done. There are something in the saying, I promise to be good, or I hereby pronounce you man and wife. There are prolocutionary acts which bring an effect by saying something. I may succeed in convincing, persuading, or intimidating you by my words. In the end, interestingly, Austin came to admit that all language is really performative. Even the statements of fact or constitutive language are acts of informing or affirming. And to communicate information is as much a performance as is naming a ship, right? So basically, there has to be certain felicity conditions, right, in order to make a statement actually possibly communicative, right? So if I claim this land in the name of George Washington I, right? And I'm actually in the middle of a garbage barge in the middle of New York Harbor, right? Like maybe I can claim it in the name of George Washington, but the fact that my act is saying I'm doing something, I'm claiming this land in the name of whatever, right? The situation of that makes that an impossible and actually funny statement, right? So there has to be some reality related to my speech act, right? I can't just say I'm King of France and make it so, right? So valid felicity conditions must be made for language to communicate. Or if I say, hey, baby, I'll marry you, and I say I do it from a clergy member, right? But I'm already married 3 more times before to 4 other different women in 5 different states, right? Then even my pronouncing the vow of marriage to a woman at the altar, right, does not have the same full force of meaning and commitment, the elocutionary act of I do, as it would have if I was not already married, if I was legally able to be married, or if I was take a wife at that point in time, right? So people can lie and get around. This is Don Juan is a good example of this, right? He's saying, well, I can't say that I'm married. I can't say I'm not married, so I'll marry you, right? And the whole thing is down to why he or how he twists words to not tell complete lies, but more or less half truths, right? So let's look, for example, you can't baptize a badger, right? The relevance of all this to literature becomes clear when we realize literary works themselves can be seen as speech acts or as the imitation of them. Literature may appear into describing the world, and sometimes actually does, but its real function is within certain conventions in order to bring about certain effects on the reader. So this is what we were talking in the beginning of the semester, right? That Eagleton said was not the case at all in What is Literature and is in The Rise of English and in the Phenomenological Criticism, right? He's now using the premise that we kind of established as a group think, right? That language affecting the reader, right? Literature does something with language that affects the reader. It achieves something in the saying. It is a language is a kind of material practice itself. Discourse as social action. And looking at the constitutive propositions, statements of truth or falsity, express their reality and effectively as actions in their own right. Literature restores us to the sense of linguistic performance in the most dramatic way. For whether what it asserts as existing actually exists or not is unimportant, right? Like, this is exactly what we came up with by debunking Eagleton's first 3 chapters in my recollection. Somebody, sorry, who's that wants to, Jonathan, please. You saying something?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, any thoughts, anybody on that? I mean, Eagleton in that 3 lines, just to kind of get away from what Austin is saying, or to like hedge Austin's into semiotics, seems to be recanting what was his thesis at the beginning of the book in the first 3 chapters. I could be off my base. Well, we talked about, right? Literature, what is literature? It's a process, it's communication, it's trying to say something to a reader about the world in a way that affects them, right? It's not don't carry dog down the escalator. It's there is such a sweet parting of such sweet sorrow. Oh, yeah, what light from yonder window breaks, right? My life is a miracle from King Lear, right? There's a province, like, it's doing something with language to make language mean something, to make reality mean something more to the listener, to the watcher, to the reader, right? And it doesn't matter if it's real or imaginary. And this is his, remember his whole first chapter was talking about how, like, fiction was the biggest descriptor, like, there's history and there's fiction and everything's actually fiction because nothing can be said to exist because even historical accounts are have perspective in them, right? And so you can't make literature be about the non-existent or the existence of anything, right? And then phenomenology comes in and says, well, what we say is existent at all, right? And his whole problem is that, well, who says what's existent or not is based upon your social class and status, and all the freaking oligarchs who try to make English be studied, to make English cultural values be important, and to make all the, tunic weavers and farmers who should be Marxist and against the rich all just ignorant and not have access to literature, right? Like, if literature is actually the performance of the linguistic performance of meaning to people, and any speech act can be literary. My saying a pun, my telling it, writing a limerick in a bar when I'm half drunk off my ass, right? All these can provide meaning in a performative manner to language, which under Eagleton's new twisting of the words, right, seems to be a literary performance, right? So he kind of comes up with a definition of literature here I agree with, that he completely bans or forbids at the first 4 chapters of the book, is what I'm getting out of here, but maybe I'm crazy. Let's continue on down the page and see if it comes home to roost. The object of this is next paragraph. The object of Austin's analysis, as he says, is the total speech act in the total speech situation. But Bakhtin shows there's areas are rather more involved in such acts and situations than speech act theory suspects. It's also dangerous to take living speech situations as modes for literature. For literary texts are not, of course, literally speech acts. Flaubert is not actually talking to me. If anything, there are pseudo or virtual speech acts, imitations of speech acts, and as such, we were more or less dismissed by Austin himself as non-serious or defective. Oldham has taken the characters of literary texts, they imitate or represent speech acts. There happened or do not in fact cover all this literature to come and take the note. So what Eagleton then says, right, is that, okay, so maybe speech acts can be literary. Maybe me talking on the street to somebody and trying to affect them with my words, right? Trying to maybe lie or to like emphasize, do you bite your thumb at me, sir? I bite my thumb, sir. Oh, do you bite your thumb at me, sir? Well, I bite my thumb, sir, right? What they're saying in those phrases in Shakespeare and Romeo and Juliet, right, do not mean the denotative sentences. Do you bite your thumb? I bite, right? The play between each speaker in those statements, right, gives the conflict. There's no conflict inherent in those words. They both state there was a question and a statement which is missing. Do you bite your thumb at me? I bite my thumb. No answer, no attachment at all, right? But the action on the stage and the interaction between the people gives it a connotative meaning of like flipping them off, essentially. Like, oh, well, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that, right? And it's a human interaction that is linguistic as social, right? And grounded in the social construction of those speech acts and those terms, right? So even if you have the freaking play of Romeo and Juliet written down and not performed or read by like Richard Gere or something, right? Or read in our own heads, those interactions between those characters have a richness which is the same as the speech act and is not this stale scarecrow once it's written down in language in words, right? The conditions of the speech act don't disappear when it's been written on a page. I think the same thing happens for associative connotative meaning in poetry, right? If I say April is the cruelest month, beginning of the way, how is April the cruelest month? April's the joyous month, right? That's a contradiction. That makes no sense. Well, it's cruel because maybe we don't want to start life again, creative destruction. The king died, is reborning. It's a hard work to, go plow all the fields and to copy. All the bunnies are working hard to copulate and reproduce more bunnies, right? How is that cruel then still? Well, it's cruel because the life that's being born is going to die. Maybe in a sterile environment sooner than it should have because, right? So you need the context to get that the statement April is the cruelest month isn't a pun. It isn't a joke. It isn't an overstatement or a hyperbole. It actually means what it says in the connotative realm of the poem, right? More connotation as it relates to Chaucer's beginning of the Canterbury Tales, right? So April's, the same sentence is with a minor alteration is in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales to begin the prologue. And so that relation brings more meaning to it too, right? And so poetic meaning, it can't be reduced to differential semiotic structures, reduced to a structuralist linguistic notion. It accretes meaning, it grabs meaning, meaning gravitates to it through time. And so even Homer's words, which Eagleton doesn't even know what they were, because who is Homer? Probably 10 different people whose different speeches and recitations were written down over 1,000 years and combined to be some text we got through the Latin and Greek translation, and now we call it the Iliad or the Odyssey, right? Like, those words are still, oh, shoot, sorry. Jose's in now. He was waiting in the lobby. Jose, can you hear me? Jose, can you hear me? Are you in? Was he not in before? Son of a gun. Okay. Well, I'll continue. Okay. So the same thing happens in simile and metaphor that over time through a series of different ranges mapped onto domains. So let's say if we look at Don's russet clad mantle from the Odyssey, right? So how does Don have a russet clad mantle? This is a metaphor in the direct sense. It's an imagistic metaphor, right? So Don, first of all, is not a person, so it's anthropomorphic, right? Don is how can it be said to be the owner of a russet clad mantle? A mantle is like a little Red Riding Hood scarf too, right? How can Don be the owner of a russet clad mantle if it doesn't have arm, head, neck to be wearing it?
Are you asking in?
Yeah, I'm asking. In what
Okay.
way does Don have a russet clad mantle?
The way I think about it is the light at the time.
And what about the light?
The colors might appear similar to the rusted mantle.
Right. Right. If you see like the sun coming up, right, and around the sun is the red clouds, right, or the red auras around the circle of the sun, it can look like maybe someone wearing a head with a hood over it, a russet clad man. So then when we take that image, then Don has a russet clad mantle. So Don is like a person. Don also has a hood. And we can take those metaphoric mappings or simile mappings and map them to other things. So if the day loses its mantle, right, or if the day casts its mantle to the ground, as happens in some other literature, right, like the sun casts off its cloak or throws its cloak to the ground, right? Like you have, okay, it's cloudy then. How can we say like the sun casting its mantle is cloudy or raining, or maybe there's a thunderstorm or a snowstorm, right? The casting its like cloak off, right, that now lies on the ground, could be snow, could be fog, right? But all these things rely upon the basic idea that somehow the sky or the sun or the atmospheric daytime, nighttime, and weather elements are people and have anthropomorphic attributes we got from Don's russet clad mantle or from the gray fingers of mist, right? And so the only way we understand these kind of poetic accretions of meaning are through deep metaphoric structures. Like if I say aim high, right? Like why is that? It means like do the best you can, right? Shoot for the best thing you can, right? Yeah, and external, you mean externalist as in like someone projecting outwards themselves into the environment? I believe that's right, Edward. Right, like a human conception of the world and description in human language of the environment, right? So here's the thing, though. If the only way that words work, as Saussure and Eagleton and Lévi-Strauss say, they're divergent, dichotomous, dialectic meanings. The sun is not the moon because it's not. It's not the sun because it's not the moon and not Saturn, not Uranus, and not Neptune, and not this, right? That's the only way we know it's the sun is because the signifiers all eventually go away and leave you only the option it could be the sun. Like the externalist explanation of the environment would not allow for that, right? Because everything about the sun is inside the person who's describing it already, right? He's not like, oh, it's a sun because it's not a moon and not a frog, not a toad, right? Comparing the sun to a person with a mantle, right? It has attributes with our human, but then transposed. So the sun takes on human qualities and a deeper meaning and characters of values of human beings, right? And it's not because it's not a toad and not a cat, not a chair. It's because we project our meaning making outward. We can say chimera and it's a lion and a tiger and a rhino or a lion or whatever, right? Because we know what those things are as individual things, right? Why chimera is the word we use for those things combined? I don't know. But the thing is that the reality of chimera exists because the word chimera exists. It doesn't exist because a chimera is not an elephant and not a dog, not a lion, not a cat, not a cyclops, right? Like these combinative words that are the mutation of experience and the externalist projection of our imaginings, right, are what language is doing and literature is doing. It's a form for adding words to affect people, right? And the diminution of it to being a historical progress, of to being a socially a shallowly scientific mechanistic reading of like putting sprockets in a watch is how language works and how the structuralists and the semioticists viewed it. But that's not true. Absolutely. Right. And there is a cultural understanding of the origins of the world too. Right. And I think the origins of the world is, or the time, space and time are always deep down metaphorical concepts. Like you can't talk about time or space or motion or the passage of time or our perception of either distance, height, any spatial dimensions without using a metaphor. I dare you. Like sun rises, I get up, elevation, I'm alive again, right? I'm gonna trudge through the day. I'm moving forward on my journey. Miles to go before I sleep, right? These are distance metaphors for passage of time. The idea that high is good and low and up is good and down is bad is another deep structural metaphor, right? Like the height of human experience, the depth of his soul, the depth of privation, that higher, not the numbers that are more are higher, right? 100's a higher number than 99. Configuration of a quantitative value, right? Cool. So like these metaphors, and this is my argument against Eagleton, metaphoric constructs underlie language everywhere in such a way that structural linguistics or Eagleton's cultural Marxist abrogation of his language is constructed to reassert power structures only, right? The idea of a power structure itself, a structure of power, a hierarchy, is a term which relies upon both a quantitative metaphor, a increase equals high, right? And therefore better metaphor to even function, to even understand a hierarchy, right? Takes a poetic metaphor to comprehend. So does so does a failing domestic industry, right? Like all these terms Eagleton uses to describe social, political, cultural events, right? In language in general, it's not just Eagleton, everyone, are based on understanding of associative meaning, mapping metaphors for things we understand part of to unfamiliar concepts, right? If I say, I am like the river, right? And you say, well, how are you like the river? Well, because can't be stopped. I get around the obstacle. This is from the Tao Te Ching, right? Like the fact that I can be like the river is a metaphorical construction of life, right? That has so many different possible meanings because river can do so many things in the Tao Te Ching, right? That you can't say there's a structural relation between signifier that the metaphor of a river, even. So let's just say, like the metaphor of a river, if structural linguistics as Eagleton presents is correct, should be able to be referent, signified, the referent and the meaning, right? And okay, I'm like a river. Tell me the structure of that. Love is like a river. There's no structural linkage other than the one imposed by poetic association. There's no way to say, well, I'm like a river, so I'm not an ocean. That doesn't tell you anything more about the metaphor. You have to go the other way to produce meaning in a metaphor. I hope I didn't steal your semiotic thunder or the structuralist thunder of Ben or the semiotic thunder of Alexis in these kind of poetic analyses. We'll be good to present next week, everybody, because we're out of time. So we're going to go Edward first up next on Tuesday, Ben following, and then Alexis following that, I believe, unless Alexis wants to go Thursday. Alexis here? All right, cool. We'll plan to go Edward, Ben, Alexis, come Tuesday, and then we'll break and cupcake and coffee up, and then move into post-structuralism probably. Might be getting lecture on that. All right, y'all. Take care. Have a great, safe weekend. Email me, message me with anything, questions you have. Sorry this has been a shit show. Sorry teams meetings are what they are. I much prefer seeing your happy little faces in class. Have fun, y'all.